All right. So remember, we ended finding out that Peter was Prince No Name. Wow. But we're ready for part three. And part three, I know it's backwards, but the title of this part is Emerald. So then that made me go, wait a minute. Wasn't part two Onyx? Y'all remember that? I don't know if I can find it right now. But part two was Onyx. And part one was Gold. So then I started thinking about it. In part one, he used the first pair of eyes, which were gold, right? And that took him to wherever it was the last place that the eyes has seen, right? And then in part two, he ended up using the black, which turned him into the last thing that he had touched. And so now this is part three, Emerald, the third pair of eyes. So I bet she's going to use them. And remember, they had just got through saying that the reason they figured out that he was Prince No Name was because of the emerald eyes. And I guess that Peg has emerald eyes, and it's really, really green eyes. Okay, so my Zoom is trying to record itself right now. How annoying is that? So anyway, so the green eyes must be what's going to be used in this one, and I wonder what it's going to do, because the gold took him to the place he's last seen, and he even used that to go across from the just deserts to the palace, right? And then he used the black to turn into a beetle and a bird, right? Yeah, and a bird. And the green. Okay, here we go. Chapter 24, The Return of No Name. I'm what? Peter took a step backward. His knees had suddenly grown very weak. Do you not see, child? Simon said, momentarily forgetting that Peter, in fact, could not see. You are a true heir of Hazelport. Tears welled in Peg's emerald green eyes. I just knew you would come back. Peter had no idea what to say. A minute before, he'd been a common orphan, and suddenly he was a prince. He didn't know the first thing about courtly manners or fancy clothes or politics. He was a hardened criminal. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, he stammered. It's some kind of mistake. Those eyes, they're not even mine. Sir Toad scoffed. Utter nonsense. The professor made those eyes for you alone. Perhaps he knew something you didn't. The boy allowed himself to consider the question. Maybe, just maybe, Professor Cake did have a more specific reason for sending Peter to this place. He opened the lid of the wooden box and smelled the sweet odor of the emerald green eyes. Could they really belong to a prince? Sir Toad chuckled. Face it, friend. No name has a name. Peter steadied himself against the iron bell. I'm sorry, I need a moment to sort all this out. Simon alighted beside him. Your Majesty, it is clear you are startled by this discovery. Now he's calling Peter Your Majesty, not just Peg, right? He says, Your Majesty, it is clear you are startled by this discovery, but I tell you without flattery that it surprises me not a bit. Justice often works in ways beyond our understanding, and when I look at the courage and sacrifice you have already shown on this quest, I see a true prince indeed. Peg burst into sobs, throwing her arms around Peter. I knew it! It's really you! Peter didn't like touching girls all that much, but he thought it might be allowed if they were brother-sister. So just think about it for a minute. Peg had both of her parents killed. Her uncle, the only person, and her brother was lost, killed, whatever, we didn't know what. Simon's the only one from even her dad's guard that's alive, and her uncle's evil. So now she's just found her brother. So this little girl has gone her whole life being an orphan just like Peter, and all of a sudden she has her brother back. The only difference is she knew she had a brother, and Peter had no idea he even had a family. He didn't know where he came from. So you can imagine her relief and why she is so emotional because she finally has a family, right? She finally has a family member. "It's all right. I'm here now," he said, patting her on the back. "We're together again." Somehow, speaking it out loud made it more real. Perhaps it was possible that he was a lost prince with a twin sister. And that meant the note, the sea voyage, and the deserts weren't all just random occurrences. They were his destiny. Peter had journeyed across the world beyond the borders of the map to free his subjects and reclaim his crown. The boy returned his sister's embrace, squeezing her with all of his strength. He could feel her heartbeat against his own, and he knew he was finally home. When all tears were spent, Peter let go of his sister and addressed the group, a new hope in his voice. "However stupidly I might have acted before, I was right about one thing. Unlocking the children's shackles leaves them no more free than their parents. They're all still under the king's control. If we're really going to save these people, we have to liberate them all, once and for all." Peg took her brother's hand. "How do we do that?" He loosed a slow breath. "We're going to kill the king." Peter knew, kill the king. Yeah, that's just a little sure, we'll go kill the king. That's any easier than unlocking all the kids that are all shackled. Peter knew they had little time to waste. He could already feel the setting sun dipping below the clock face, which meant supper time was coming soon, and he did not want to be on this platform when the bedtime bell struck. But coming up with a plan for assassinating the king seemed impossible. Incarnadine and his forces were just too powerful. Peter thought more than once about donning the green eyes and hoped that they might grant him great speed or strength, but he knew the time was not yet right. He could feel it. Until that feeling changed, he would have to rely on his own wits and abilities. It is really windy right now. After yet another heated argument over poisoning the king's wine, Peg refused, knowing he sometimes used children as food testers. Peter decided to approach the problem from a different angle. Professor Cake had told him to trust his nature, but Peter wasn't sure which nature the man was referring to. Was he a prince or a thief? Having exhausted all princely solutions, the boy decided to imagine their situation as a lock that he had to open. What type of lock was it? Well, it was the sort that could kill you, one rigged with all manner of booby traps. There was Incarnadine, protected by his deadly clockwork armor. Supporting him was a horde of vicious apes and at least a dozen horrible sea serpents. Soon, hundreds of thieves would be joining him as well. If their situation resembled any lock, it would definitely be the Bigelow Brink. The brink contains a mechanism that, if jarred, releases 1,000 spikes from the ceiling down on the perpetrator. The only way to crack the Bigelow brink is to pick it oh so delicately, and then at the exact moment the latch releases, you have to smash the entire lock with a sledgehammer. When Peter was 6, Mr. Seamus had forced him to open one at the local treasury. The boy had no difficulty picking the lock, but was not strong enough with his safe mallet. The release mechanism went off, and great spikes shot down at him. Were it not for his being so thin and frail, he would have been skewered like a shish kebab. As it was, the spikes missed his vitals, if only by a hairbreadth. So since their mission seemed to be this type of lock, Peter knew that two things would have to happen at the same time. First, he would have to free the captured slaves. This was the lock-picking bit. The second, he would have to smash the king and his army. This was the sledgehammer bit. The boy knew exactly which part would be hardest. I'm going to need reinforcements, he concluded. Well, you've got us 3, Sir Toad offered, but I don't suppose that's what you meant. Well, what about the slave children? Peg said. If we can arm them, my subjects will fight. She corrected herself. I mean, our subjects will fight. Peter gave his sister a smile. You're not the only one who will have to get used to saying that. Do you think there's enough of them to overpower the apes? I don't know, but they'll die trying. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that, Peter said. Plus, they can't fight until they're free from those chains. There's just no way I can unlock them all in time. Maybe you could teach me to do it, Peg said eagerly. Lockpicking takes years to master, and even if you could learn, that's still just 2 of us. What I really need is an extra 100 pair of hands. If only my brethren were here, Simon said. Their beaks could finish the job in seconds. The old bird tensed his talons, imagining the conflict raging just across the chasm. He would give anything to be battling alongside Captain Amos and others, but alas, there is no way to reach them. The great chasm is too wide. It seems the just deserts are a perfect prison indeed. But what good is a prison if you can't check up on it? Peter said, turning to Sir Toad. The king mentioned communicating with Officer Trolley, and he ordered Longclaw to send weapons. He must have a secret tunnel or bridge of some kind. And you think we should tag along? Sir Toad said, nodding. Fair enough. But how do we find this long-clawed chap? It's an awfully big palace, and we haven't much time. Just then they heard a roar from below. Oi! Who left this ruddy hatch open? The 4 were on their feet in a flash. Apes, Peter said, stuffing maps into his bag. We've got to get out of here quick. Hold on. The princess stopped him and pulled several parchments from his grip. I think I have a better idea. Jawbone was a simple ape with a simple job. Guard the clock tower. His post was a stool set behind the maintenance door. He had to make sure that no one passed without showing papers signed by the king. For 10 years, he performed this rather tedious task without so much as a single incident. It helped that the door was cleverly concealed behind a rose bush. Since tramping out of bounds was strictly forbidden, it was highly unlikely any human in the palace even knew the door existed. And how could someone walk through a door they didn't even know existed? Still, it was Jawbone's sworn duty day in and day out to protect the tower with his life. His very, very, very boring life. All of that changed when the king's address was spoiled by 2 rotten children and an overflowing sewer system. Immediately after the attack, Jawbone had been called away from his stool to join the rest of the horde for routine inspections throughout the palace. The change was as exciting as it was unexpected. Jawbone had gotten to spend nearly 2 whole days bursting through doors, smashing furniture, shredding sheets, and generally terrifying the hapless citizens. All things considered, it had been the highlight of his military career. But Jawbone's blissful mood was spoiled when he returned to his usual post to find that someone had propped open the secret door with his stool. The discovery left the ape reeling. What would the king do to him for letting an intruder slip by? Oi! He snarled, charging inside the tower. Who left this ruddy hatch open? The ape did not climb the steps like a human. Instead, he swung and bounded up the wood rail, which groaned under his weight. Attention, intruder, I know you're up there. There was an intruder. Jawbone would make certain he or she wouldn't live to expose the breach. But what if it was a she? What if he had finally found that meddlesome princess? That would be luck indeed. He burst onto the platform, swinging his mace over his head. That's a weapon. Come here, you royal snot. But there was no princess waiting for him. Nothing but grinding gears and a gently rocking bell. Just my ruddy luck, he said, disappointed at the thought of not getting to eat a princess. Glancing down at his feet, Jawbone noticed some papers strewn across the deck. The ape took them in his paws and studied the images. He could not read, but the pictures were obvious enough. Someone, whoever it was planning a secret attack on the palace, complete with warships and rival apes. A greedy smile played across the beast's swollen lips as he imagined presenting this most important information to his commander. He would be rewarded for sure, perhaps even be put on slave duty where he'd get to beat the children all day long. I've got to find Longclaw. Jawbone dropped his mace and scooped up the scrolls in both arms. He snorted giddily as he stomped down the steps out of the tower and into the palace. So he thinks they were plans for somebody to attack the palace, but it's really the king's plans to build a warship and go get more apes. Right? Okay. Peter, Sir Toad, Simon, and Peg all listened from their hiding place inside the giant bell. They could hear the guards shouting below, bursting with excitement. Hey, Bloodhorn! Ma! You two seen Longclaw anywhere? It's really, really, really important. Peter smirked as he listened. I never imagined we'd be using the enemy as a guide. He nodded to his sister. Good thinking, Your Majesty. My Thank you, Your Majesty, Peg said back. Now let's get down there and see if he can't help us find Longclaw. So they're using him as bait to figure out where Longclaw is, because Longclaw is the one that's getting ready to take weapons over to the Just Deserts, right? So they're going to follow him to Longclaw, okay? Following the ape's trail was easy enough. Between Peter's keen sense of smell and Jawbone's big mouth, it would have been hard to miss, and the long shadows of the afternoon created plenty of dark places for the four of them to hide as they ran upstairs and across bridges. That's strange, Peter said as he hoisted Sir Toad onto a ledge. We seem to be climbing upward. He had assumed they were going to be led underground. How else could they cross the great chasm? As they traveled, the group worked out the remainder of their plan. Once they found the king's secret passage, Simon would use it to travel back to the Just Deserts and get the other ravens. Together, my brethren and I will make short work of those cursed shackles, the old bird said with relish. Then he dropped his head, remembering that his own beak was no more. Rather, I will have the honor of watching them do so. He makes a good point, Peg said with concern. If Simon lost his beak trying to peck open a lock, what's to say that won't happen to the rest of the ravens? We can't afford to disarm our guards like that. Peter nodded. Actually, I've been thinking about that same thing. I was able to examine those shackles firsthand when you chained me up in the den. Peg gave an embarrassed groan, no doubt remembering how she had tried kidnapping her own brother. Peter went on, I noticed that the locks were covered in rust, which meant the mechanism was too clogged to open properly. I'm pretty sure that's the reason Simon's beak snapped, but if we were able to somehow oil the locks beforehand... I know just the thing! Peg grabbed his arm excitedly. The slave kitchen has barrels and barrels of scouring grease. I can steal some, no problem. The recent discovery that her long-lost brother was a great thief had produced a rather strange effect on Her Majesty. She was now desperately eager to enter into the profession herself. So she wants to be a thief. That's kind of funny. We'll do it together, he said, smiling. Brilliant, Sir Toad clapped his hoof on the stone. The war's as good as won. We've got an army and a way to free the children. The only thing left is to hire a bard who can commemorate our bravery in a song. That and the sea serpents, Simon reminded him. Oh, drat. The knight's voice faltered. I'd forgotten about them. We ravens cannot fight in water. Sir Toad, you're the only one among us who has killed a dragon before. We look to you for guidance. The knight emitted a faint squeak from someplace in the back of his throat. Sensing his friend's discomfort, Peter spoke up. Sir Toad is a brave knight, but defeating all those sea serpents will take a little more than that. He is a dragon slayer, Simon said plainly. What more could we possibly need? The boy hesitated. There are times when being a leader is less about having the right answer than about having an answer. Peter knew the others were looking to him for a response, his friend most of all. If he didn't say something quick, then their faith in the whole operation might falter. Just leave it to me, he lied. I have a plan. He has no plan. Right about this time, Jawbone found Longclaw at the base of an enormous stone turret. He began boasting to his superior about the tremendous discovery he'd made in the clock tower, even going so far as to suggest a few ideas about how he might be appropriately rewarded. While Longclaw whipped his subordinate for wrinkling the king's very important documents, Peter and the others crept through the shadows and tried to figure out where exactly they were. The tower before them was by far the tallest structure in the kingdom. An archway at the base revealed the inside to be empty, save a stone stairway that curved around the inside wall. Those stairs go all the way to the top, the princess whispered, but I've never seen what's up there. He keeps this place guarded every hour of every day. Presently, dozens of apes were hauling armaments, means weapons, up the tower stairs. Hurry it up, you louts, Longclaw shouted at them. The king wants these weapons in the desert by sundown. Makes no sense, Peter said. How can they cross the chasm from all the way up there? Sir Toad peered above and gave a report. It looks like there's a wooden dock sticking out from the turret. There's some kind of largest contraption hanging over the edge. I see flames, ropes, and some sort of canvas balloon thing. Of course, Peter said. The king has a... Ooh, here's another word for you guys. Ready, Gemma? Dirigible. Dirigible. D-I-R-I G-I-B-L-E, but they're getting ready to give us the definition. Dirigible. A what? It's a flying machine, Peter explained. He had never witnessed such a wonder himself, but he had heard talk of them from sailors who had ridden them at carnivals abroad. That's how he reaches the deserts. He just flies there. Simon squinted up at the barge, trying to make sense of it. I do not understand this flying machine. Where are its wings? Peter ignored the question, knowing it was useless to explain, and also being somewhat uncertain himself. Sir Toad, if those weapons get across, the Ravens will be finished. We have to commandeer that vessel. It's no job for a blind person. Do you think you can pilot it? Me? I wouldn't have the foggiest idea how. That balloon you saw is controlled by a furnace and a damper. The hotter the fire, the higher the ship will rise. Peter hoped he had that straight. The rest is just like a regular boat with sails and a rudder. He placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. You navigated the Scop all the way here, to a vanished island. Sir Toad, I know you can do this. There was something in Peter's voice that filled the night with a faith that eclipsed fear. If you trust me that much, I will try to trust myself, but I'm taking Simon with me. If that thing pops, I want someone who can fly back to tell my story. I would be honored to fight alongside you, the Raven said. Peg stood up and took her brother's hand. Then it's time. Peter and I will sneak back to the mines and slime the locks. You and Simon steal that machine, fly across, and fetch the royal guard. Hearing this summary, Peter realized just how feeble his plan was. His mind flashed through 100 ways the voyage might go wrong for Sir Toad and Simon. The fire in the furnace could die, the balloon could tear, a storm could blow them off course. Even if they reached the just deserts, they would be sailing into the middle of a war. Sir Toad, Peter started. The knight silenced him with and placed a hoof on his arm. Run along, your majesties. You two have a kingdom to save. And that is the end of 24. We are so close to finishing. Let's see, 24. So 25, 26. Ooh, 26 is short. 27. Oh, it's fun to read the chapter titles. 28, 29. I may have to read 2 chapters next time. 26 looked awfully short. I'll double check. 31 chapters. All right. Bye.